I don't like the, yeah.
We should put her, you remember that one meeting, I guess I was up on this screen? I didn't know that. That's what we should.
I think that's a really terrible idea and nobody should listen to that.
I heard that.
That's why I'm on video mute, so nobody can do that against
can
my
just-
will.
That's awesome.
I think we should all experience that at some point.
I think I was when I was, okay. Alrighty, welcome everybody this evening to our special meeting. We'll go ahead and call to order and then we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay.
Sorry. Well, let's do the pledge first. Sorry, I'm getting order. I am. All right. Director Jones, you want to kick us off? All right, now we can do the roll call. Here.
Here?
Here.
Here, so I cannot hear Bridget. I just followed my timing cue from Doug, but I cannot hear Bridget.
Sorry, I'll talk louder.
Okay, thank you.
Well, your timing cue was right on. We didn't know that. All righty. Do I have a motion to approve this evening's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Miss Lima,
Yes.
Mr. Levinson,
Yes.
Dr. Schultes.
Yes.
All right, so first item of business is the resolution to close East Middle School. Do I have a motion for this resolution?
So moved.
Second.
All right, now we can have discussion.
You know, I'll start off. I want to reiterate everything that we've had a number of meetings and I've shared, my points of view in that, so I don't want to belabor those necessarily, but I guess in summary, I'll go back to, I definitely see there's a need, we need to do something, quote unquote, something at the middle school level to address the issues they're having with their staffing and being able to deliver programming that our kids deserve. And right now they're hampered because of having, I think it's been said, what, a death by 1,000 cuts, right? And I get that. I've been there. And so I'm not minimizing that. I'm not saying it doesn't exist or have my head in the sand with it. But what I hear beyond that is, you hear it was brought up about the staffing model needs to be addressed, and that's above my pay grade on how that has to look or be addressed. But again, I go back to, I think we're short. I think if we vote to close East or West or whatever middle school it is at this point, we're short-sighted in terms of really looking at all the perspectives and getting all the data and listening to all the voices that we can in a reasonable amount of time. And that's, okay, what is reasonable? Figure that out later perhaps. But to really vet it out. And it may all come down, when it's all said and done, that East Middle School is the school, and maybe others that need to be cut. I get that. I think I've been clear that I certainly understand that could be a possibility, but I don't know that we've exhausted other possibilities too to get us where we need to be. And there may not be other possibilities. I get that too. But I don't think we've tried to find out what those may be. So, you know, I appreciate, I guess there's a sense of urgency. I guess I just personally don't see it, again, I don't live it, but I don't see it as a crisis that it's been portrayed to be at this point. Is it worrisome? Is it concerning? Absolutely. But because of that doesn't mean we necessarily have to jump from, here we go again, step 1 to step 20 when we haven't exhausted all the other steps perhaps in between. So I think I've stated this a number of times before. Hopefully sounds coherent, makes sense, but that's kind of where I am with that. It's not a discussion more than a comment.
Any other discussion?
So can I jump in there? So I think we all see, and I don't want to put words in Doug's mouth, but I think that what we all do see is that it would be a crisis if we just kept cutting this next year and required all the middle schools to meet our current staffing models requirements, giving our declining enrollment. So I think that we all do see that particular crisis. But I think that part of what feels more limited is that is a crisis, you know, of our own making. If we require those staffing cuts, if we paused and tried to figure out the best path forward and didn't require those staffing cuts, then that would be a different scenario. We did get predictions from Mel today that said that her best prediction for right now is that we get 14 to 17 million new dollars for next year. So I see the potential. And our ESSER money, you know, we conflate these issues a little bit. When we're talking about our ESSER money, we wouldn't allocate that money toward raises anyways, because that money is going away in a year. And so, you know, of course, the whole budget is linked, but we couldn't allocate those money directly to raises. So I see the potential for just creating some space for ourselves to figure out the best path forward. And part of what I would hope to see moving forward is I've been trying to contextualize how we're using Shannon's work. And Shannon was hired. I honestly, I'm not, maybe that's more of a question, but I believe Shannon was hired to tell us what schools to cut. And Shannon did his job. He told us some schools to cut. But it's our job as a district to figure out how to make that work for us in a way that builds our community, even though we're cutting. How do we build trust? How do we build resilience? How do we build a future that folks can look to and feel good about? And so I would hope that we could take the information about what cuts could happen, the fact that cuts need to happen, and create a process that folks can buy onto, can understand, and we could move forward from here. But I think we all acknowledge that we can't expect middle schools to cut all the FTE that we would need them to cut to fit our staffing model. So I would just hope that we would just give everybody a tiny bit of space to figure this out in a way that brings everybody together.
I would just say that after spending the last few months going over all of this with Dr. Hill and his team and Shannon, I feel like we have exhausted it. I feel like that was, much of that was done before we even knew about it. They've been working on this. They've been cutting. Schools have been scaling back. They're already stressed. We've heard from so many teachers and principals and staff in the last several weeks that, they're getting to the point they can't take anymore. And I think it's irresponsible to wait until we're in crisis mode, which appears to me to be coming quickly. I don't think it's that far off into the future. I don't believe that, given the information that I've seen and heard, that this would have been brought to us to look at if all of those different ideas hadn't been exhausted. And I mean, I'm well over 100 emails just about school closures in the last 2 weeks, probably approaching 150 or so. And I've read every single one of them. I apologize, I couldn't respond to every single one of them, but I read every single one of them. And, we shared those ideas and made sure if we saw something unique or something that came across as, hey, we just want to make sure that we thought about this, that somebody thought about this, that all of these ideas have been considered. And there wasn't anything that hadn't been considered and hadn't been exhausted. It's
What are
unfortunate that
those things? I'm sorry, what are those things? I'm not aware of them.
Well, I mean, just the reduction of staff, the tightening up that all of the schools have done. I don't see any other way besides when you have too many buildings for the number of students that you have enrolled. I'm not sure that there's another answer. I sure haven't seen one. And as we're approaching that inevitable cliff where we run out of the ability to average our per pupil funding, the amount of money that we get from the state, I don't know how you just keep spending your way out of that problem.
I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. These are all good points, and I'm going to really butcher this, Mel, so tell me when I said something wrong. So the ESSER funding, that's a great point. It's not funding that we would use towards raises, but we have moved things into ESSER funding that we're going to have to pull back into general fund at some point. So a good example of that is our online staff, right? We were able to move that into ESSER because that is something that is related directly to COVID. So unless we're going to get rid of our online option for students after ESSER funds run out, those positions have to move back into general fund. And there's a lot of other things too that we are going to have that discussion around about if these are things that we want to continue to offer, they are going to have to move back into general fund. And so when that ESSER funding runs out, while that can't go towards raises, that is going to have to be pulled out of general fund. And that is a general fund that, as Mel's mentioned before, we're on a 5-year average, and that 5-year average is running out soon too. And so we're going to hit a cliff with that. I think right now she said we're getting over $5 million more than we should from the state. And if the enrollment projections continue to decline, then that gap's going to be even more. And then to the 14 to 17 million, my understanding is none of that's guaranteed right now. While we know we'll probably get additional funds, we have historically tried to take care of the needs we have in the district and then put the rest of that funding towards boosting our salaries for our staff, our teachers, and everybody. And so, and that's how we've been able to do that 10% and 8% raise over the last couple years, but we're still not as competitive as we should be with other school districts. So, that is funding that we would try to put towards those things. And then, I think the issue that I think Mel has expressed before is that while we may get some additional funding this year, we have no idea what it's going to look like the year after. And so those are just the things that we have to kind of try to predict and look at. So yeah, I totally agree with we can't use ESSER funding for raises, but unless we're just going to cut everything that is currently funded by ESSER when ESSER funding's gone, then we're going to start pulling it back out of the general fund to be able to fund those things. And that's where I think the worry for the cliff is, and I have no idea. Okay, Mel's nodding her head, so I said something right. So, so again, just to clarify that, and yeah, it'd be great if we get $14 to $17 million, but my understanding is the governor's budget proposal was one thing. What was put out recently was actually less than what he put out. So between now and May or June, when they go through this whole back and forth, it's hard to predict exactly what's going to be in there. And then I guess that's a question. Do we want to do what we've done the past couple of years where we try to put that towards raises and increase salary for our teachers and our paras, or do we not want to do that? And like I said, the last meeting, we could still do some of that, but it changes the amount you might be able to put towards that. And again, we're constantly trying to compete with other districts, and we've done a really good job. Our finance department, our HR department has done a really good job over the last couple of years to try to get the starting salaries up higher. I think when I first got here a few years ago, it wasn't even 40,000 for starting teachers. We've got it over 40,000 now, and I know that's a priority. I believe that's a priority for our district to continue to do that. So those are just things that I think we have to kind of keep in mind as we're talking about current budget and future budget. Is those are just factors we've got to consider. But good points.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I definitely understand all of that. I think a lot of the arguments that we're hearing are, yes, in the future, it's coming. The crisis is, the cliff is coming. It's right now, we still have the time to do the right thing and to take our time to make sure that we do the right thing and build trust. And that is what I am strongly advocating for. And yes, I understand ESSER is going to run out in another, just over a year. So I just really think that we need to take our time and make sure that the community is moving forward with us. And then again, if we come to the same conclusion, great. If we don't, great. At least we have done our due diligence. I think we have the space and the time and the breathing room. And yeah, and Angela, I definitely hear what you're saying. Teachers have been saying, like, we cannot keep going with all the cuts. And so what I'm proposing is that we pause on all the cuts. We just take the time, we invest, and we get this right.
I just don't see how we can pause on the cuts. I mean, that just further puts us into a very bad place. I mean, I think the cuts that have been made so far were necessary, and they were painful. And they're affecting our students, they're affecting our programming, they're affecting our staff. They've reached out partially as a group. We've heard from many teachers and administrative staff, especially over the last few days. They're asking us to move forward and to not put this off. And I agree with them. I just think we're to a point where it isn't just about doing something. This isn't haphazard. This isn't without a process. This isn't without a lot of work and a lot of detail going into this. This isn't something that just popped up and we're just going to haphazardly close a school or schools. This is something that has been worked on, has been looked at, has been approaching for several years. This is not new. It's new to this board. It's new to a lot of our community. It's unfortunate, but sometimes, until it gets to that point, it's difficult for people to really, they're going on with their lives. But when you're here, it's up to leaders to address those problems before it's a disaster. I think we're headed there. I mean, I've had, I don't know how many hours I've spent with Melanie in the last 3-4 weeks, but it's significant. And in looking at that budget and in looking at all the numbers, I think we are to a point where we have to make this decision.
I just want to address the haphazard part. I think that is where I feel so deeply uncomfortable here. So, we learned 2 nights ago that West Middle School only has 277 students from within, or 73 students from within its boundaries that attend West. And so I requested for all the middle schools, everybody within the boundaries that attend that school. And so West has 270, East is the next smallest with 340. And East has the challenge program. So East has 120-ish more kids than West does. And so, my question was, well, how long is it going to take for West to even get as big as East is, just on a kids in the boundary area basis? And the response was, well, if I had to guess, I maybe about 10 years. And so for me, and I didn't ask for a guess, I asked for like a modeled prediction. And for me, I just feel like every number I ask for, every justification that I get, it does not feel like an answer that's satisfactory to me and that makes sense to me. It does feel confusing to me that we would be closing a smaller school with a smaller student population over a larger geographical area because we think that there will be growth in that area, but we also built a heck of a lot of new schools in Fruita that we thought we would need because we thought we would have a big population growth out there too. So I'm just really nervous about the accuracy of the numbers that we're dealing with, especially given that the answers that I'm getting. It does feel much more haphazard to me.
So and one thing I'll mention is, because I didn't have the numbers a while ago, but, so back to the ESSER funding, because that just to make sense around the numbers. So we currently have $6 million in ongoing salary and benefits in ESSER, so that's what I mean when we have to pull that back in at some point. That's $6 million that have to be pulled back in to general fund. And then right now, we've moved $1.7 million temporarily to cover, so remember we talked about how we didn't have to make all the cuts to middle school right now. That's another 1.7 that we've had to put into ESSER. So just, those are some numbers. If there's questions about the future growth and things in the west area versus the east area, I think Shannon's on there if there's questions specifically from the board, but I think he's online, I'm not sure, so.
So Brian, let me clarify that. So we right now have close to $7 million in salaries in ESSER funds.
Closer to 8.
Are those positions that we believe are needed because of COVID impacts, or what is our justification there?
So my understanding is that they were positions that qualified under ESSER and COVID, so we were able to move them and to be able to utilize those funds to cover those positions. So the example I gave a while ago was online school, and so we can provide the whole list of that to the board. But those are positions that, we would need to be, like I said, unless we're going to get rid of the online program or some of these other programs that we would need to bring those positions back for. So, and Mel can talk more to it if we need to, or she can send out that information to the board.
Yeah, I'd love to see that information. And I'd love to understand what positions existed prior to COVID and what positions were new.
If
That's
I
it.
could just add, as I'm sitting here listening, years ago, when I was in college, I went to a retreat. This Catholic priest, I'm not Catholic, but I went to this retreat, and this priest said something like, when you're dealing with problems and situations, if you can remove yourself from it and sit up high, I suppose, and look down, kind of separate yourself from it and take a viewpoint of it, it can help your perspective as you move, as you come back down, so to speak. And as I'm listening to this, I think, I don't know, Dr. Hill and Angela, I think by what you've said is justified like what we're suggesting. Angela, when you brought up, and I know you've racked your brain, you've worked with Melanie, you've sat with her, and you can't come up with how this can work. And that's to the very point, is because you can't, or I couldn't, doesn't mean there aren't solutions out there. And the whole idea, what's being suggested is that we bring other perspectives and other problem solvers and other experts to look at this, and we haven't done that. to see if we really all racked our brains, not just a handful, not just you or me or somebody, or Mel or somebody else. And then Dr. Hill was bringing up, you know, the thing about the online school and how ESSER dollars are going there, and I bring up the thing, we haven't, as a board, let alone a community, looked at what do we prioritize, how we're spending our money, or the dollars we have available, and
That's not true, Doug.
who's done that?
I've done it. I've
you've
spent
done,
this
but
last year
Okay, so
looking at those things.
so who's done it?
deeply.
You have, okay, and I'm not, but I guess I look beyond, that's not our job, right? Our job is to hopefully, at least I view it this way, that when we prioritize where we're gonna spend our money and how we're gonna spend it, that it's at a minimum, the five of us had had a discussion to say, okay, here are the dollars we have, what do we value? Is it summer school? Is it our online staff? Whatever it may be, and we haven't done that. And to say that, listen, I think it was brought up, it was a little over a month that this has snowballed into where we are today. Now, you're right, this has been a problem that has been built for months and maybe years before. Sure it has, okay? But it really didn't come to the forefront until most recently, okay? And because of that, for whatever the reason, is really irrelevant at this point, it's there. And so do we, you know, in a frenzy or a panic, try to address it as opposed to sitting back, be thoughtful, because we do have the time. We aren't at a crisis point yet. You're right. There is an impending issue coming up in a couple years. And no one's suggesting that we take all this time and just have our head in the sand and, you know, it'll work out. I think we do have to come up with a plan, a more thorough plan, and get more voices and eyes and perspectives on this. That's the idea about the time. And in the meantime, not to have our middle schools continue to suffer, but to sustain where they are, right, with the funding they need to keep status quo until we can work through this more thoroughly. And again, we may come up with all the conclusions you've come up with personally. That may be where it's all directed, but I think it behooves us to include other voices. I don't know if that's, and I think that's what we're suggesting, is taking our time and taking a pause. Not taking it forever, not putting our head in the sand, but here's a problem that's really come to the forefront in the last month or so, less than that perhaps, and let's tackle it in a really thoughtful way and prioritize where we want to spend our money, what monies we may get, what we don't get, and how are we going to do that. And I'm not saying even just the five of us or our finance department necessarily, but you know, we have a lot of experts in our community that this affects. It'd be great to hear those perspectives too. So I think that's what we're saying.
So not that, I mean,
Hope that makes sense.
is this thing on? Yeah, it's on. So not that it doesn't make sense, and I understand what everybody's saying, but my frustration is the five of us have sat in meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting, and we were an issue, brought a problem. We sat there, we discussed it, we talked about it, and then we said, "This is a must. This has to happen. This has to happen." And then principals came to us and said, "This has to happen." Do we want? I've said this 10 million times. Do we want to close schools? No. Do we value our children's education? Yes. Do we want to make sure they get education? Yes. But we're at a point where something has to happen. Principals have called us and said, something has to happen. But I mean, if we wait and then we come out next year and it's 10 times worse, then we're cutting more jobs and letting more people go. And that's not fair to anybody. And I'm just asking, I'm trying to figure out, everybody wants us to wait and take time and do, you know, I understand that. But how much time do you think we need if it doesn't work? Because then we're taking more time. Let's see if it works next year. Well, let's see if it works the year after next. Let's see if it works. We can't. We're at a point where it sucks that it happened. It started in 2019. We didn't address it in 2019. Now we're in 2023 and we have to address it. And we all knew that. Do any of us want to do it? No. But we have to.
I agree, Director Jones. We all had meetings last spring, probably around this same time, with the previous superintendent and with Melanie to go over the staffing model. And at that time, it was presented to the board where we had to make a decision with the cuts at that point, and the board during those meetings, and then when the budget was brought to us, last year, we said, we will go ahead and fund what we could to those gaps in the FTE shortages. That was a decision that this board made last year. So we've been in these meetings since this time last year or even earlier. And then in October, November, this board was asked for us to each have the 2 2-in-1 meetings, just so there's obviously not 3 board members at a meeting at a time, to sit down and assess the situation coming up, so that when we got to this point, the board could obviously be having these conversations. At that point, this board gave permission to Dr. Hill with Shannon to go ahead and start getting that information. We all knew that that information was going to be a proposed either for the 23 school year and potentially what the options would be if it was a closure for the 24 school year. So I knew well before Christmas that we had, given the district permission to start the process with Mr. Bingham, who's done all of our other demography work. And I've gone back and looked at his predictions, and they have been pretty close to every prediction that has come through, save one, where he actually thought we were gonna get more kids than we actually did. So, he tends to be pretty conservative. And so that year after COVID, everybody thought we were gonna get more kids back, and then we actually didn't. And so that was the only prediction where he was actually, somewhat off. But pretty much between him and Mel, they have figured out those numbers, and then Melanie takes those numbers from the demographer every year, and we work through the budget. And that's how we end up figuring out our budget. And it's unfortunate that our state funds education last. That's why we do not get our information until June, when the legislative session is done, and the governor, then decides what we're gonna do. And so, obviously, call your legislature and see if we can get funded first, so then we know what we're dealing with, rather than at the end. So I also am concerned that we're discounting the experts that we have in the room and the experts that we have in our district. In everything that we have done this year, from charter schools to other decisions that we've had to make, even when it comes to the strategic plan, we have had amazing staff that have, from senior leadership on down, come and present their expert advice and their expertise to us when it comes to that. And some of those have been recommendations for the charter schools, which they go out and do the work. Dan goes and talks to the DAC committee and gets feedback and brings that information back. That's what Dr. Hill did. Dr. Hill went with Shannon's information, with senior leadership, with our site directors. Those site directors talked to our principals, and they've had these conversations. So I say all of this because there's been a process, and there's been a process by experts. And I agree, there's probably people in our community that could give some other recommendations and shed some light on some other things, but I'm not going to discount what our staff and our district has done with all this work and what we have relied on what Shannon has done for over 18 years. And so we've tasked Dr. Hill to find those leaders. He's hired a good team. They've done a ton of work. And I sat down and chatted again with Melanie for over an hour the other day on the staffing model. Our staffing model, while things can be tweaked, will actually work better for our schools once we have more of our FTE in our buildings. So I think, when you work in a staffing model, and any staffing model is not gonna work great if you don't have the FTE you need in the buildings. So going back to the drawing board and saying, we need to reevaluate a whole staffing model as an option, we don't, because it doesn't matter what the model is if you don't have the kids in buildings and then the people in the buildings that we tie, that money to with those children.
Just have too much building for the enrollment
There's-
that
there's
we
just-
have and that we're
there's not
going to
enough-
have into the future.
There's not enough children. And the concerns I have based off of information that we've received from going out and talking to building principals, talking to teachers, listening to everybody, you know, from the schools that are on the closure list to the schools that would be receiving to all the other schools, you know, getting all of that information, because those principals are the ones that have to make the cuts or determine what FTE they're putting in their building. Are they putting a PE teacher in? Are they putting an interventionist in? I mean, that is the reality for them of where they get to use and spend that money for the people they need in their buildings. And right now, the concern with the way that some of our class sizes are balancing out, or rather not balancing out, is when you have 30 kids in a classroom, every teacher I've talked to says the challenge of learning that happens in a 24-room classroom to a 30-kid classroom is a real challenge. And I cannot put my head on my pillow at night knowing that if we are shorting kids for another year by having these larger classroom sizes, especially after COVID, if I know that we have options right now that would remedy getting classroom sizes balanced, and it would get more programs and funding into schools. And that would help those kids, that would help those teachers, that would help those principals, that would help those buildings. We cannot just say that we pause on, you know, FTE cuts, because that money comes from somewhere else. So then that money, those ESSER dollars, which we won't use to pay staff, will then come from cutting, we might have to cut summer school. And I don't know that this board needs to decide what those things are. That's what's gonna come from our team of experts. They're the ones that are gonna come and say, this is where we get the results. That we've actually had a good, you know, results from summer school this year, or we're having good results from tutoring, or we have this. They're the ones that, you know, Melanie does a really good job of kind of telling us where things are, and then obviously in conjunction with our academic team, of the things that are working and where we're getting results to get these kids caught back up. So I respectfully disagree on your assessment of it, because I don't think that this next year is really the year where we get to take this and move forward with it, because if you wait for the next year, then it is too late. This is the time for us to do it when it's not a panic. Because next year, doing it, there's no buffer to adjust, and then you have to make hasty, more irrational decisions, because now you're in a real pinch. And so, I mean, just like everybody right now in our own personal lives, because of the economy, everybody is taking a step back and having to figure out how they're gonna maneuver their budgets and what things they're canceling and what they're doing. If they wait till they get in a real pinch, then it's really, really hard and you don't have a plan. Right now, we have the time to do this and actually have a buffer and provide better programming and services for our children. And absolutely, and security for our teachers. I mean, also the cost of waiting now with the climate of where everything is at with our staff is, I don't think that going an entire year is going to be helpful. Many principals have already said from buildings all across the district that their staff is asking for letters of recommendation. We will get to the point where we can't displace staff. We will actually have to do a reduction in force, and that's way more concerning.
Thank you. I wanted to say a couple of things. So one, just in direct response, so principals themselves, the middle school principals themselves are the ones who came together and said that our staffing model is broken and we must fix it. So that's not like me saying that. That's just me relaying what they have said. And yes, they absolutely begged us to do something because but what that is they need to be protected from more cuts. But I want to say that a couple things. One, to have classrooms of 24 students, they can't actually have any extra staffing if they have classes of 24 students. They can't afford extra staff until they have 29.5 students in a classroom. So yeah, I think that we all would love classrooms that small, but that's not how our staffing model actually works. But I just want to say that yes, we did have experts. We got expert opinions. Typically, all of our expert opinions are filtered through senior leadership. And the job of senior leadership is to bring in those recommendations. And then we weave those recommendations into the community and into just this our broader perspective. And again, it was Shannon's job to recommend what schools to close, but then it's our job to take those recommendations and find a way to create success. And that's what we have not yet done. We're just cutting, and we're not helping our community exist within the reality of our cuts. And then the last thing I want to say is that there are standard best practices here. There are many documents about how to do this, and we have not done yes, we have had an expert give us an opinion of what schools to cut. And yes, people could find different things in there to nitpick, including me. But the bigger point is that to say that there has been a process, there are standard best practices for states and school districts who have embarked on this for years, and they have come up with ways to create the most success in these very complicated times. And that is what I want to get us to. I think that we have to keep in mind, yes, we have to create success for our teachers and our students, but we also have to create success in the community. And that is what we have not yet done. And I really would love to take the time to try to do that.
So I appreciate that. I just want to, thank you. I just want to point out for the staffing model. So the term broken, I think the term was flawed, but regardless, I think it's I don't want to misinterpret that the comment around the staffing model. So the staffing model, okay, you want to fix it, you want to do different things to it. That will not, in my opinion, again, it will not solve this problem. So I don't want to give a false hope to people thinking that, well, if we took a step back and we completely redid our staffing model, that will actually somehow fix the issue we're having with declining enrollment and not having as much funding. When I've talked to principals, and I'm not going to try to represent every principal, but a lot of the concerns that have been brought about the staffing model in the past is like, well, my school is a high needs campus, and so I would like additional help and support through that. So they're looking at something that's not as necessarily an equal staffing model, but more equitable. So those are things that, yeah, we can actually have those conversations and try to address those things. But I just don't want to give off the sense that this idea that if we're going to address the staffing model, that's somehow going to fix the funding gaps and the issues that we're having at the schools with declining enrollment. Unless we're going to start putting millions and millions more into staffing the buildings, which is what we are currently doing. We are using unfunded, we're funding unfunded positions by not having that funding there. So, and I'm looking at Mel because I don't know if that's how the model works. That they have to wait till they get to 29. I'm not sure, but and again, maybe that's just more conversation we need to have around the model itself. But I don't know that that's a solution to the problem, and so I want to make sure that we don't think that, well, if we push pause and then we just address it through the staffing model, that's going to fix it. I don't believe that's the case. Can we make tweaks to it? Sure. Can we do some things to try to have that funding be more equitable? Sure. But I don't think that that's going to actually fix the problem in the end, and so I just want to make sure that that is stated. But I hear I understand that the principals put that in the letter, and that's something that we need to look at.
Well, and that's what I was stating was because they had put that in the letter, I went and verified with Melanie about that model. And there's tweaks we could do to the model, but I agree, Dr. Hill, we don't need to overhaul the model. But Melanie, is our model only work at 29 kids? No, no, okay. Thank you for confirming that, so. All right, is there any further discussion?
Just comment, as I'm listening again, I think essentially what we have here is just basically a fundamental difference of opinion on how we go about solving a problem. And, you know, Andrea, I appreciate your comments about not being able to put your head on the pillow at night. You know, just perspective, and take this as insulting, but I want to be clear. You know, I started teaching in 1840, no. 1980, right? Jimmy Carter was president, so that gives you some point of reference. You know, 10 years as a teacher, 23 years as a principal on this. I get it. I've been there. I've through my career faced many budget cuts and many things we had to adapt at our school and our staff to make things work. So I certainly understand. So to suggest that maybe I'm indifferent or I don't care, just I get it. And this has been troubling to all of us, and I appreciate that. I know it has. I think what we're really talking about here is different approaches of how to solve a problem. I think the one approach we're suggesting is time, deliberation, pausing, you know, getting it right, and then there's another one, we have to act and move ahead. And and I just think they're totally different approaches and different ways of going about it. And the approach that's been suggested by Carrie and I particularly is we may come to the same conclusion, but we can help bring people along. When we say people have been brought along, I don't think that's totally true. When we've had so many staff, teachers, administrators who have been caught off guard by all this in the last month, and I don't think anybody can deny that has happened, which indicates there were some gaps and steps to bring people along. I don't think intentional things just happen. And so there's just
To that end, I just want to
Sure.
throw in a little bit, is, you know, I can't imagine that, you know, all of our schools, I think, do great work, and we've got amazing people that care so much and put so much of their heart and soul into what they do, that I really can't imagine that even with more time and you know, as I've spoken to principals anyway, in the last month, what I've heard over and over was, this is not a surprise. We've been talking about this for years. We've just been waiting for the day that it happens. But because of their passion and skill at what they do, and the teams that they've brought together, and the incredible progress that they're making and have made across the district, I can't imagine that given any infinite amount of time, any school would go, yeah, ours is the right one, and it should be us.
And listen, I don't think it's lost on any of us that what we're hearing loud and clear is something has to be done. I think we all get that. I think our staff gets it. We have to do something. And so the question is that something done, in my opinion, easily and maybe blundering into things, or is it being more thoughtful and deliberate? And so that's what I'm saying. We're really looking at two fundamental different approaches to this, and that's where we are. And I'm not saying good or bad. It's just we recognize if that's where it is, that's where we are. And
I just want to be really careful that you may think that moving now is hasty,
sure.
but others don't. Yeah. And so I
and the vice versa.
Right. I mean, so I don't want there to just be this definitive line, because I do agree with you that I think there's just some different ways around how we think we need to get there.
That's right.
Right? Yep. And so, and is any one way going to be perfect? No. No, I mean, there'll be pros and cons to both, so.
And that's what I'm getting, and
Okay.
just stating,
Yeah.
but I'm just.
I just
probably
want to,
better than me. No,
yeah,
it's-
I just want to be very clear, because on some previous votes, it's been, based off of decisions, I think there's just been some misunderstandings that, if you don't vote the way one board member likes, then that's the way it is. So I just want to make sure that we're kind of saying that we're just fundamentally seeing different approaches and ways to this, so, okay. Any other discussion? All right, then we'll go ahead and call the vote for the resolution to close East Middle School.
Okay, Mrs. Heights,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Miss Lima,
Yes.
Mr. Levinson,
No.
Dr. Schultes,
No.
Please no clapping while we're voting, please. Did we hear Carrie's?
She said no.
Okay.
No.
All right, we are now next on the agenda for a resolution to address the secondary grade configuration in the Fruta area. So this one is just giving the district the direction to be able to move forward with kind of, I guess, our trifecta, right? Or do you want to try to?
Yeah, so I think Shannon talked about the multiple kind of layers to this one. So it involves boundary change work. It involves basically trying to make room in those buildings. If we're going to combine a 6th through 8, and if we're going to take 9th grade over to the high school, I sent out a board response or board notification earlier from Principal McClaskey, who had some ideas as well on if 9th grade comes over to Fruita Monument High School. So this has really just given us direction to go and normalize the grades in the Fruita area, and that's going to take a lot of work to do that, but we need direction to be able to say that's essentially that we're all in agreement that we need to make that a 6-8 and a 9-12 in that area, and we can go do what we need to do to make that happen.
Right. Did we do the motion? Okay, do we have, sorry, so thank you for teeing that up. Okay, do I have a motion for a resolution to address the secondary grade configuration in Fruita?
So moved.
All right, now discussion.
When we do that, because I think it's a great idea, right? That's kind of what we're getting at. Let's look ahead. Is there, prior to that taking place, because I wouldn't want to see happen what we're currently going through is all that work's done and then we come back and question the validity or the perspectives. Prior to that happening, can it be outlined to the board, here's how we're doing it, who's going to be involved in doing it? Just who's going to be, I know Shannon's going to be involved, I get that. But are there, with this, who else would be involved with this besides Shannon? And have an outline so the board can look it over and, okay, this makes sense. And so then you can go off and do the task as opposed to going off and doing the task, coming back, and then it's like, well, why'd you do that? We didn't, you see what I'm getting at is trying to be proactive and
Yeah. So there's
foresee problems.
So there's still information that I need from, and I know Clint and Jen and other folks on our team have been going out and looking at those spaces and trying to run the numbers. So, and there are steps to this because you do have to pull students out of that attendance zone to make it work in the end. And so that's why we talked about the necessity to do some boundary changes and some of that work. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be our team going out and doing that work. And we can bring it back to the board and say, this is what we've kind of figured out through that.
This is for boundaries.
Well, it's boundaries and where are we going to actually
So
move the
would this be
kids.
like when we did, whenever it was, I can't remember, the Broadway Scenic, Wingate, and the Appleton thing we did a while back, will be sort of like that, where we did some virtual, that was the time we were doing more virtual, people could jump in and be part of a discussion and ask questions. Is that what we're envisioning?
I
or-
need to talk to Shannon about what exactly that would need to look like. The hard part with this one is that I don't know that there's really an option in that area if we don't change boundaries.
Oh, I'm-
So-
and
Yeah, right, so I'm saying in the past, that was a discussion about, trying to change boundaries, and if we were going to change these boundaries to be able to move kids into this other school, that can help that other school. This is, I feel like we're kind of in a place with this one that we can go out and talk to the community and tell them what's going to happen, but I don't know that we're going to necessarily be asking for.
No, and I'm not, I guess what I'm asking, I hate to keep using the P word, that before somebody or whoever undertakes this initiative, that as a board, we have a sense, okay, here are the people doing this work, and here's what they're gonna do, that we have like a syllabus kind of thing. We're gonna see what people are gonna do before they get going, so if the board has questions before they get started, that can be all front-end loaded as opposed to muddling through it at the end when there may be some problems.
Yeah, that makes sense. So again, it'll be our folks, and we'll go out and, we've already started some of that work. And so we can bring updates back to the board. And then, yeah, if you have specific questions about it, we'd be happy to answer them. But there's still some information we're trying to get together on that.
I think if we know we know the direction that we're heading in, what the ultimate goal is with our fruit of schools, with our fruit of schools, I would be comfortable with regular board updates, letting us know kind of where they are, what they're finding, and then we can give that direction publicly at that time.
Yeah, this is really just looking, I feel like it's kind of it's the board saying we're in agreement that we want to normalize grades in the fruit area, and so go out and make that happen, basically.
Right, so what that means, so that we're clear, is that there is a school consolidation process in that. Because you're trying to move, we're trying to put kids 6 through 8 in one building, and then 9th through 12th. And so just as long as our community understands that we are trying to put 2 schools into one. And so there is somewhat of a semblance of a consolidation that's gonna happen in that process. So yeah, I think what we're doing now is just tasking the team to make sure that all those 3 pieces that we need to put together between getting the freshmen or the 9th graders over to, Freedom Monument, and then getting the 6 through 8, whether that's in the 8-9 building, figuring out the transportation traffic flow there, just because you have the high school. Their team will figure out all those pieces and parts.
And Andrea, that's a great point, and that's what I'm suggesting, before we even get updates, is maybe a one-page outline that here's what we're going to be looking at. This is the end goal in mind to do the things you just mentioned, Andrea, and here are the things at least we're going to be looking at: transportation, boundaries, where kids are going to go, those kinds of things. And it just, so we bring everybody along, not just us, but it sounds like we're all on the same page on that.
Yeah, so I think if Dr. Hill and his team just kind of want to, I guess, re-outline what Shannon said that we need to do for those 3 pieces, and then you guys can kind of,
Yeah, you're talking about right now?
well, no, don't do it now. No, we're just saying,
No, I mean, outline what needs to be done?
yeah, no, I think as a board, what Mr. Levinson is asking is just kind of, at a later board meeting, we'll just outline what those 3 pieces were again as what we are moving forward in the Fruita area. Yeah, we don't need to do that now. I remember what Shannon mentioned as the things we need to do. And then just a continual reminder that that's what we're doing out there. All right.
So what's the resolution that we're doing right now?
The resolution right now is that we're giving them the permission to move forward with doing all of that, because that one is, those 3 pieces have to all have to line up at the same time. That one would then start for the 24 school year. So they would start doing that this year. And so some of that would be some boundary changes that Mr. Bingham would then go and talk to those communities. And there's several things that are wrapped up into that piece of it. And we have it lined out in our resolution that's here. Any other discussion? Dr. Schultes? Have anything?
No.
No?
No.
Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and call the vote.
Okay, Mrs. Heights,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Lima,
Yes.
Mr. Levinson,
Yes.
Dr. Schultes.
Yes.
All right. So we have some board discussion.
Okay, can I jump in? I really want us now to focus, like, I had hoped that that conversation about East would shift immediately to, like, what are we doing to support those students? What are we doing to support those teachers? Like, what are we doing? What is our, so I think we failed here in supporting them up front. Like, why, like, we need to have a robust discussion about how we are going to make sure that we do everything we can to work forward from here. So, like, I know HR is going to go to East. What day is that going to happen on? Kind of, Brian, can you walk us through what is going to happen and how we're going to work to do good here?
Yeah, and I'm actually going to ask Jen maybe to come up here too to share a little bit, because I know they were having another long meeting today with our instructional leadership team to kind of walk through a lot of the work that they've already started a while back. And if there's anybody else you need to bring up, Jen. I mean, starting immediately, if the decision has been made, we will obviously send out information to staff and to families to kind of let them know what we know at this point. We've set up I know people are going to have a lot of questions, and so our goal is to not bombard the school building with all those questions because they're not going to have all the answers themselves. And so I know Callie and our communications team has worked on a place for that stuff to be funneled so that we can try to respond to it as a district. And so that'll be in the information that we send out as well. I know beginning tomorrow, with anticipation of this, we have teams going out to the school to not only support students, but also support staff within that building, and not only just tomorrow, but next week as well. And then there's other information, again, that we'll send out to families on, I know there's going to be questions around what happens with the challenge program, and so we've been having those discussions. That's involved our head of the GT program in the district. That's involved Ms. Slay at the school, and other individuals as well, is talking about the location that would be best for that program and how do we support it. Are we going to offer transportation for those students who are already currently in the program? So those are things that we've all been having discussions around with Clint, and so we'll get that information out as well. And we've talked about having a sort of a parent meeting to be able to walk them through that as well. So there's a lot of pieces, and Jen, you can chime in on other things that I'm missing out on, but the immediate need that we want to take care of is making sure that we have folks at the campus tomorrow that can support staff and students, because we know there's going to be a lot of emotions around this, and we're not naive to that, and so we want to make sure that we have folks there that can help support them. We know that we may have staff that need that support, and so we'll have additional subs in the building and other centralized staff that will be there to try to help them if they need support there as well. I know some of our own team, I'll be there in the afternoon to try to help as well. So I'm going to stop rambling to see what else did I leave off.
Nothing. I just want to, we'll add to if there's anything. I just want to try to emphasize to the board and to our community, we knew that this might be a decision that was going to happen this evening. And so it was really important that we all came together as a leadership team to actually, we knew we were going to have to provide support tomorrow regardless of what happened tonight. So there are many people, staff, students, and the community as a whole that are going through some hard emotional moments right now. And we did not want to minimize that regardless of what happened this evening. So we did come together today to ensure that we had a plan regardless, and that we had supports put in place for tomorrow. Knowing what the decision is now, much of everything that Dr. Hill said, it was ensuring that we have, we're able to deploy and make sure that we have the supports there for our staff and our students and our community. Yes, we will ensure that Nikki will make sure that we have all the information that they need, what they're ready to receive and to talk about. One of the things I'm going to ask Ari to talk about, it was really important. I've had the opportunity to talk to all of our our principals, and I think the biggest thing that they said is they don't want things, they're feeling like this is being done to their staff, and so they really wanted to have that opportunity to talk about what they needed and what they want to not knowing what it would, the decision what would be, so how can we do it with them? So I say that we're gonna provide these supports, but when they're ready or when they want to talk about certain things, whether it be with HR, that we'll be ready and able to deploy even more at their request. I know that Ari is starting there tomorrow. Ari has spent, each one of our site directors has spent, is a lot of time with their principals and their staff on how the principal has wanted to move forward with their staff. So Ari, I don't know if you want to share any more about what the plan is for tomorrow, knowing what we know now.
Yeah, we can, am I on? Yeah, as Jen and Dr. Hill have said, I mean, so one of the things we're doing, I mean, as directors, I mean, we are constantly meeting with our principals, talking with them. I know with East, I've, asked the principal to designate a group of teachers, and, we meet weekly, and really the question is what can I do for you, right? I mean, this is what we've talked about that may happen, and so what can we do for you? Is it helping? Is it not? District 51, sadly, but in a good way, we have a great crisis response because we unfortunately have had a lot of crisis. And so we're basing our tomorrow off that same model, just maybe not with, death or suicide involved. But the idea is that, yeah, I mean, our East Middle School staff is going to be in crisis tomorrow. So we have in the morning, we'll meet, give an opportunity for teachers to come in, talk about it, just what's going on. Our typical response to is we'll have sort of a message that all of our teachers will read to the kids. Throughout the day, we'll have some roving subs for our adults in case they need some time, they need to come talk, or they just need some space. We'll have substitutes ready for that. For our students, we'll have our counseling team and our mental health support ready, and kind of the same thing. We've learned over time, but really we try and keep our environment as stable as we can, right, moving forward, but giving the opportunity for everyone in the building, if they need it, to have that time. So we'll have adults, our, as I mentioned, our counselors and mental health team there as well, just waiting, and we will, when I go there tomorrow, we'll just sort of work out what the system looks like, but typically when a student needs it, we allow them. We contact the office, let them know they're coming down, so we're ready for them. So we'll have those things in place as well. And really, so that's really for tomorrow, and then we do have, like I said, a lot of people ready to deploy and just be there, whatever that need looks like. East, as Jen had mentioned, they've sadly been in crisis, and some of the balance is having lots of adults walking around and not. And so they've requested not to have lots of adults walking around. So we're ready, we'll be there, we'll have our teams ready. And then come next week, same thing. I mean, we'll do it again, right? And we're going to do it again and just be there ready for them, and then continually ask them, what do you need from us? How can we move forward? What can we do to support you? And that's really our plan and process.
So meeting their needs, first and foremost tomorrow, then looking at next week as well. But then when we need to come back to talk about what's next, how are we ensuring that our students, what does that transition look like from East to the new schools? There are some steps that need to take place when it comes to boundaries, and ensuring that those boundaries are defined, identified. We have to go through the county and ensure that the county, because we can't do anything with our own system, our Synergy system, until the county has made those changes and those boundary changes, then it rolls over into our system. So then we'll be notifying all of the staff, here are the new boundaries. These addresses will go to West, these addresses would go to Book Cliff. We, of course, would offer another, we're not going to call it school of choice, but another opportunity, because not only do we have students that are leaving from East, but we have students that have choiced into East, and so they will need to go through another process to determine where do they want to choice to next. We're not going to call that school of choice. We will call it something else. And then what are the activities? This is an end of a moment and time in our lives of our students and our staffs and our families. And what does an ending like this look like? And how do we ensure that we have some closure and we have opportunities to look at what a new beginning will also look like? And so working with East and working with our receiving schools so that we can move through this transition. And it is as smooth as possible, but allowing for and providing support any emotion that is coming through. This is going to be emotional and hard, and we want to make sure that everybody has that opportunity to experience it, to live through it, and be able to move through it to help identify what's next.
Is there a way, like with the receiving schools, where, it doesn't necessarily have to be, let's say, a complete ending to East, but there's sort of a spirit of that continues to live on, melding maybe, I don't know, I'm thinking like a mascot or just something where, it still lives on, somewhere else that just kind of helps with that transition. I know that's been mentioned by a few principals that had some ideas of trying to help welcome students in. I don't know, have those kind of conversations or things been kind of talked about or thought about?
Yeah, actually we have. So sitting down with the principal of East, we've had lots and lots of conversations of what if, and that's been part of our conversation. And actually it's from Paul, who's actually been through this, and as he talked about those kind of things, we talked about a culture jar, or, his example is what they did, and we talked about that as well. And, we haven't talked about it with staff because we don't want to overdo it, but at least as the leader, we are brainstorming possibilities. And so the premise with that is that, you take a bit of East culture, you put it in a jar, the things that you want to take with you that other people can see, and those great things at East that you're now going to spread to the rest of the district. And we have talked about just our caliber, we've mentioned it before, of teachers, right? And just the messaging that, it may not be here, but you are an excellent teacher, and now you get to spread your knowledge and your great systems and structures and the great things you're doing to other cultures as well. So, we've talked about that kind of stuff.
And like I said, we'll push out things as quickly as we can for information. There's just, as Jen mentioned, there's things that have to happen before something else can happen. So like for hiring, because we've said we want to take care of our folks and try to help them find positions. We can't finalize staffing numbers at the other middle schools, at all the middle schools, if we're going to do this other, we're not calling it SOC, but another a shortened window of time for those families, because that might mean students go to another middle school and then we have to make some adjustments. So there's going to be a little bit of time to have those things kind of play out so that we can then get the numbers, the FTE and the numbers, staffing numbers for the schools, so that we can then post positions and start helping folks with those open positions. So like I said, we're going to push out stuff as quickly as we can. I just want to reiterate that the school building is not going to have all the answers to that. And so as much as we can not bombard them with those questions, we'll have information in the stuff that we send out for where those questions can be directed so that we can try and help at the central level.
I think that communication piece, like Dr. Hill just said, because there are, kind of look like it as locks. We have to go through this, to go through this, to get through this. And I know that our students and our families are going to have anxiety about where am I going, where am I starting, where is my school. Our teachers are going to be worrying and wondering and having anxiety of where do I go from here? Where is my job? That people, place, and those rituals and routines, they're being wiped out right now. So we have to acknowledge that. And then once we know where those boundaries are, once we know we get through school of choice, once we know where our students are going to go, where our programs are going to go, then we will have that opportunity to ensure that each building is then staffed and all of our positions are posted. But I think the biggest thing is that we're going to have to really do very well at communicating the timeline of what has to happen when, so that understanding and they know what's next is coming up.
I would just love to get sort of constant updates because we're going to be also
Of course.
getting asked a lot of questions, just so that we can answer intelligently what it is that you're doing, what has been done, and what you're working on now. Just give it, if we can just get a regular update, I think would be helpful for all of us
That could probably
as well.
come via Dr. Hill
Yeah.
through like a board notification of just kind of maybe, you know, every few days, or if there's a lot going on, or kind of once a week of just where things are at. Because a lot of times people will email the board and then we can know which, like where to point them, you know, in the direction to make sure they're getting their questions answered or whatever they need, so. Great. Thank you guys for
Wait,
sharing. Oh,
I'm sorry, did I miss, what day is Nikki going to go out there with HR to talk to all the teachers?
We're planning on the 16th. I think it's our in-service day that we'll go out in the morning.
Okay, and is that, sorry, I just want to make sure everybody knows exactly what to expect. So thank you for clarifying. Does that also mean that Nikki is going with HR on that day?
She's nodding yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
thank you. I think that's good. Okay. All right.
We have other discussions?
Yeah, we're still open for discussions, open board discussion.
So,
Is your microphone on?
yes,
Okay.
unfortunately, for everyone. So, the elephant in the room, so where are we with the next question as far as elementary? Because again, a couple nights ago, we talked, it's from the meeting last week, they all blend together, that at that point, there seemed to be, in a lot of people's perception, there was a consensus of some steps we were going to take, and then last couple nights ago, it looked like we were backtracking on some of that from the previous meeting. So are we setting up a discussion thing on that again, or what are we doing with that?
Well,
Or have we discussed what are we doing with that?
yeah, well, so we've all received a lot of information over the last, several days, new information from the community, D51 staff, and so I personally need more time to digest that information and go through it. Obviously, we do have to make a decision on the elementary schools. I think when we had our workshop, we were fleshing out a bunch of different ideas that could be possibilities, and now I'm reconsidering some of the options that were spoken about, because I think there's just, in light of new information, it's just an understanding of what some of those ramifications could be. So, so I would just like to take some more time personally. I don't know where the rest of the board is, but to take that information and really go through and digest it. And then I know Angela's out of town, so we were kind of thinking like in a week from today. And I think also just kind of pacing these out for the community to digest. It's a lot. We've had a middle school, we've had a grade reconfiguration, there's boundary changes, and then there's elementary schools. And so I think, there's been a lot of conversation, and even that night, we went through a lot of information. And so I think, just to be clear, it's good to just, I think, pace this out. Obviously, the district needs a decision soon, so I feel like in a week's time, I can digest that information and talk to any more district staff if I have any other questions. I don't know how everybody else feels about that, but we've gotten a lot more information since last time.
Can I ask, what is that information? What are you referring to?
Just emails and feedback, and then going out to schools and talking to district staff. So I just would like to take a little more time with the information that we've received to go and, we got the principal letters from the elementary, so I would like to actually go talk to all the principals. So I just kind of get a better feeling, just around the letter and from the individual principals, and what's kind of going and impacting their buildings. So I just want to, like to talk with them.
So, can I just clarification, because, and you mentioned, there's a point, Melanie, I think someone mentioned it, no decision is a decision at some point, so is there I have to assume there's a deadline that HR and other folks need to know if we're going, if we're going on the path of, which we talked about a couple of meetings ago, about forming a committee and having a deadline date of September 1st, something like that, or if we're pulling the trigger for next year. So those are the two options that it seems. Am I right with that?
So I don't know that, yes, I don't know that there's a drop dead date for, if the decision's gonna be made now. The thing about the decision, if it's gonna be for next school year, is, we can't move forward on other things until
So you know
that happens.
That's right.
And so, like, we can't do the elementary staffing models yet. That means we can't post positions then. We've been holding off on posting any principal positions because just in case. So those are things that, if the longer that takes, it just means it delays, that work that needs to happen. And now if it was, to the question of, taking more time in a committee, my recommendation was, if that was gonna be the case, that we would wanna bring something back no later than, like a final decision no later than, sometime in September.
Sure.
Just because that way then the board could process that and then hopefully make a decision no later than October. So I guess it just depends on what direction we get on that.
Well, that's what I guess I'm asking, probably not clearly enough. So is when do you all need a clear decision? So you can go down either path with, like, right, posting positions. I imagine it's yesterday or 3 days ago.
Yeah, I was gonna say for those reasons,
As soon as possible.
yeah, just some direction on it. Like I said, if it's gonna be, timeline extended, committee together, all that work, then we need to know that so that we can, move in that direction. If it's gonna be closures for next school year, to your point.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, great.
Can I make just a point here? So we just voted to close East. We have no idea what the ramifications of that are going to be. We have no idea what this is going to take to make this successful. I absolutely think that we have to send this to a group of folks who can consider all of the things that we actually need to consider in closing a school. Can we also take East as a learning opportunity, learn from it, wrap that into our next decision making, but let ourselves work through this process, see what we need to do better, and make sure that we get the next ones right. That is my deep request. I really think we need to do this right. Now we have the opportunity to learn some more. I think we didn't learn from everybody else who's done this and their findings in the best practices. And I think we have the opportunity. I think that we must. And also the other thing is if we're moving forward with this conversation, I need to understand, there's a few things I need. The first one is I need to understand exactly why every single one of those 10 schools is on the list and exactly why every one of the other schools is not, in detail, including particularly Fruita, that has 2 of our most underutilized elementary schools in the district at 49 and 54%, when nothing else is that low. So I need to understand what's going on in Fruita. I need to understand the criteria that have been followed so far have been not applied in a methodical way. But I think just starting from the beginning, this all needs to be laid out in so much more detail if we're going to actually go down this path. Also, there's a lot of errors in the decision-making matrices. We need to work through all of those. There's a lot of work that needs to be done here if we actually think that we have enough information to make an informed decision here. I think my last request is that I think this needs to be filtered through central admin. I need to understand Shannon's recommendations through our senior leadership and understand what their recommendation is for us.
So then,
Go ahead, Will.
so I need to know, well, you say people, what people would you want on here? What I'm asking is, I mean, I'm not saying you're not right, I'm not saying you're not wrong, but who do we need? We already have our site directors, which are on the ground, they're right there. We already have our central admin, our senior leadership that are out there. We have Dr. Hill. Who else do you want to put on the committee? That's what I'm
Yes.
trying to understand.
That's a great question. So all of the best management practices list multiple categories of people,
Okay.
including folks involved in local governments, so folks who can actually help with the transportation issues, the actual folks that we employ through the city and the county for safe schools routes, the city and the county. So, I have talked to the economic development coordinator, I've talked to our planning department, I've talked to our transportation people, all of those people who can actually help us figure these things out, who can figure out, where a lot of injuries occur around schools, or what the, vehicle impacts of things are going to be. So yeah, all of the people who can actually support us in this decision making. I think that, and again, I don't know them all off of the top of my head, but there are entire manuals written about how to do this. And they detail the types of folks that you need to move forward with these decisions successfully, to create success in your community, and to develop a collaborative decision-making process. So of course, somebody representing teachers, somebody representing parents, it's a wide swath of folks. They're not huge committees. In California, they recommend 7-11 committees between 7 and 11 people, but people who are invested in answering the hard questions. And they even recommend things like, if you have to close schools, then don't let people on the committee who are going to just say, no, we're not going to close schools. So there's ways around making sure that we can create success, but really ensuring there's a multi-stakeholder perspective, folks trying to address the questions that, that we are too, and that some of our experts have, or maybe we don't have the tools to, or whatever. But I also don't think it's I understand the spirit of the question and I appreciate it. So yeah, I would expect that would be a larger conversation between our senior leadership who actually puts this together. But there's plenty of guidance documents listing the various categories of folks that are helpful in these situations.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if I could piggyback, and Will, that was a great question, and Carrie, thanks. I thought a wonderful response, and really, a couple weeks ago, we kind of, over many hours, kind of came to that consensus that there was a need for that breadth of a committee to add to what Shannon has done. No one wanted to throw what he did out, but to build upon that and bring in more voices so we can make a more informed decision. I hadn't thought about, since we're doing East now, that there's some things we can learn from that as well. So, and again, I know we're not voting on that tonight. It makes sense.
Yeah, and I want to be really careful that you're making consensus. I mean, at least the way I'm hearing it from you is that the board came to some kind of agreement.
That's what I thought we did.
No, we can't. We didn't vote on anything. I mean,
We've done a lot of things. We
can think around things and have maybe some similar ideas. And I think at the end of that evening, there were several things that that we discussed. But then, I mean, you even said the other night, like, sometimes you have your mind made up about something and then you get new information and that brings a new light to something. And so while we had a robust conversation and we were workshopping that information, there's now been other feedback given that, I actually have a lot of concerns around a committee now versus from last week. So I just want to be clear that
But
you guys, we need to do this here. So if you'd like to make comments, you're going to have to step out because we've got to do the work here. So I'm just saying that there was no definitive decision made. So
I get it, and I agree. and I did say that, you think on something and more information comes, you rethink it. I was using that as a starting point when you're right, we didn't vote on anything, we didn't do a resolution, but there was a general theme that night, and obviously isn't that way tonight, that's what we thought about. And you're right, new information has come, and I get that. What I'm also suggesting is, you were mentioning you want to go out and visit with all the principals, and I think great thing to do. But a lot of the work you're thinking about doing, and Carrie mentioned it, is exactly what, again, I think we talked about a couple weeks ago, about there's so many things to look at, and we're time sensitive here. And again, going back to the East discussion, taking that pause, doing it deliberately, bringing other voices in. Now, if we don't think that's important, then that's, again, a fundamental different way of looking at this. But I'm just suggesting, I just want to know where we're at with this and how we're going to decide. Because
think
at some point, you're right, we have to make a decision. People are hanging on this, and we can't keep dragging
And that's
it
what we've
out.
heard over and over. I mean, we got the letter from the principals, which was one thing, but we've also heard from many of them, in addition to that, saying they need a decision now that, again, hindsight's 20/20, and with schools that have already been identified, I think it makes it just even more difficult. I mean, people are already putting in letters of resignation. They're already trying to make sure that they're taking care of their livelihood. And that's what we're hearing from principals as well,
Sure.
begging for us to not make the decision now versus doing it later.
Let me, I have read the letter from the elementary principals, and I would just give you something to think about, at least how I viewed it. And I'm sure you don't have it in front of you, but I knew where they were coming with this. And in the very first paragraph, in it says, I think third sentence, it says, we understand that the topic of school closures and consolidations may not be popular with all members of the community, and that this is not a decision to be made lightly or without considerable thought and consideration. I took that to be, we have to be thoughtful and take, not do it lightly. And I'm not saying we are, but it can be construed that we are if again, we act in haste. And then later in the next paragraph, they talk about, we are deeply concerned about the future impact of inaction and how it may affect students, staff, well-being, student performance, salaries, curricular materials, professional learning, programming, capital development, and the list could go on. And this is what Carrie was talking about. Again, there's so many factors. They're suggesting there's a lot of things we have to look at with making this decision, which we really haven't. And then what I gathered, let me finish. At the end,
Just like a list of
please,
those
please.
things.
At the end, I was reading the individual comments, and the theme there came that we have to do something, right? I think that as I read through these comments, and so what I really interpret this letter to mean, as much as anything, is that something has to be done. I think we all acknowledge that. We've just given one option as to what can be done, and I wrote, so moving forward, what does that mean? Does it mean do schools have to close? Maybe they do, but maybe they don't. And we haven't exhausted, I'll go back, we have not been exhaustive in looking at this. And we're more than, there were some terms used that I haven't really, and it's semantics to a degree, but we use terms like consolidation. Well, what we're talking about with those schools is not as I view consolidations. Consolidation was, when we built Chipeta, that was consolidating Columbine Elementary at the time and Lincoln Park at the time into one school. So you didn't separate schools out. They were total schools that moved in. That's a consolidation. What we're talking about is, I think our demographer mentioned, we're taking them offline, which seems to me kind of cold. But it's, you know, you're talking about closing or absorbing. They're different mindset. It's different. And we're not talking about consolidations. We're talking about closing schools and disenfranchising, I think, these kids and families that have been there. And again, that may have to be, I can't say that enough. I get it. That may be where we go. And it may be more than 3 schools. It may be 5 schools when we get through a process. But we don't know that yet. And I think we owe it to our community, to our staff, just about everybody, that we're very thoughtful and deliberate and exhaustive in making a final decision. And I don't think there's anything out there that says we've been there yet, or even close to it. So when I look at this letter, I know what they were intending to say to me is, please do something. And right now, the only things that have been presented to us is consolidation. And I don't know any of these folks really, what does that mean to them? I bet you take all those 25 principles and they'd all have a different definition about what that would mean, okay? And so I think there's a lot of things, just to the basic thing of what we're doing, if it's closing, consolidation, going offline, to all the things they listed that needed to be looked at. So I think this letter, to me, is really an advocacy of do something, right? We're waving a white flag out there, and to be thoughtful about it. And that's how I take that letter. Not as a blanket, they want to close things, so let's just do it. I think it's more depth in that than we've given it credit for in the first look. So that's my thought on that.
So I think that I think we're getting way ahead of ourselves. I understand where we're at right now. The question was, or what are we setting for the meeting for next week?
Yeah.
So we get to the point where this was great, this conversation's awesome, but then when we come here next week, we sit around and we do a resolution. We say, no, I'm not approving the resolution, and we go into the reason why. Now, if that means we give the schools more time, then we make that observation then. We're not sitting here talking about that right now. We're inventing the wheel. I mean, like you said. We're going to keep the main thing the main thing. The main thing is, we talked about the resolution for East Middle School, and now we make a plan for a meeting next week. And then we sit here next week, and we come out and say, hey, the resolution is to close blah, 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 blah. And if we say no, then we move on and say, this is the option we want to do. You know, and if it is more time, great. But I mean, we're going to sit here and argue for another 3 hours about something that's,
Right, at this point, we
we've
just,
got it now.
at this point, we need to just state, if Thursday works next week for everybody, then we can come back and take the vote on elementary schools.
And will we have a process about what things we may be voting on, or is one person deciding what we're voting on that night? In other words,
Well, the resolutions get worked out with
Okay.
Tammy on kind of what that wording is. And so then, yeah, then based off
so
of,
we may have multiple resolutions we could consider. In other words, one may be, and I'm just throwing, that, well, I don't even speculate, but we could have different resolutions.
Yes.
Okay. And do we get with what, Tammy, Brian, on this?
Yeah, and I would say if, for myself and our staff, if the decision ends up being that we're going to take more time and do a committee, I would prefer an actual resolution saying that, and with some deadlines on there, because, hindsight being 2020, I think back when we were having these discussions, even in December into November, that probably is something that I should have asked for at that time, so that there was clarity around the direction we're heading. I thought people understood where we're heading, and I know that that's been discussed, that people had different understandings around that. I think I would request, or I know I would request, if we're going to delay and add more time, I want a resolution that says this is what we're asking and this is when we want it brought back. And again, my recommendation before was, if it is going to be, I don't want to use the term delayed, but if we're extending the timeline, and if we're going to do the committee and all that, I just don't think we can go beyond like sometime in the fall, like a September, because of the fact of, again, we're learning through all this. So if you can make that decision earlier, then it gives time for things like we had to make a new, we're not calling it SOC, we're calling it something else because we missed that window. So things that would give us enough time to help with those transitions if it was going to happen for the year after. So, yeah, so maybe it's multiple resolutions.
The best way, we're all thinking different resolutions to get for you, Tammy.
Yeah, I'll get with Tammy and we can just work through her with the board. Yeah.
Right, any other discussion? Right, oh, go ahead.
And I want to just share something that I I was going to share it
Oh,
earlier,
yeah,
but
sorry, does next Thursday work?
yeah, that's right. Next Thursday.
5:30? I don't know what does,
Dr. Schultes, does that work for you?
Yeah, I'm checking right now.
need to double check too.
Yeah, I'll have to check with my husband, but yeah, we'll it seems like it.
Mhm.
I
5 or
just
5,
want to make
5 or
sorry.
5:30?
Yeah, either.
5's fine.
5, yeah.
So wait, I just want to be clear. There's a chance that we're going to be voting to close some elementary schools next week. That's what we're saying.
There will be several resolutions. One could be
Yes,
to
that-
close, one could be to, you
Extend.
know, to abstain, one could be to, but there'll be several resolutions for us to vote on.
Probably just 2 or 3.
2, yeah, maybe 3.
Does that make sense?
I mean, I hear your words.
Oh,
I just
sorry,
feel
does that make sense?
yeah, I hear your words. I just feel kind of in shock that we would like at least for the middle schools we talk, we had like many meetings so people could start to digest it. I just feel like yeah, I think I know that there was pushback on what Doug said, but I also walked away from the meeting a couple weeks ago with the loose understanding that we were all on the same page about considering a committee, and I know that we still are considering a committee, but I just really worry about the care with which we're approaching this and how this is going to be perceived by people. I just really
Have you all went and met with any of the other principals?
yes.
Okay. All right, Dr. Hill, did you have something?
Well, unless there's other stuff that folks need to talk about. So I just want to say this has not been easy for anyone. I want to acknowledge that. It has not been easy for this board. It's not been easy for our staff who support our schools. It's not been easy for our students, families, and staff at the East Middle School in particular. And it has not been easy for our community and the D51 family as a whole. In my 15 years in public education, I've had to make a lot of tough decisions and have been put in a lot of challenging circumstances, but this has definitely been one of the toughest. School closures are not something that anyone ever wants to do. We don't want to close schools in D51, and we don't want to continue down the path we've been on over the last few years with having to cut staff at our buildings due to declining enrollment and loss of funding tied to loss of student enrollment. We find ourselves in a difficult position with staff looking to us as leaders for solution. In this case, part of that solution means the closure of a school. The closure of a school that has been a great place of learning in our community for so many years. The closure of a school with great staff, great students, great families, and great performance. East Middle School isn't closing because of anything they did wrong. East Middle School is closing for reasons plaguing our district that are outside of their control. I want to make sure that's clear. While the building at East Middle School is closing, the amazing work of the students and staff within that building won't end because it's not the bricks and mortar that make a school special, it's the people within it. As we move from an ending to a beginning, we will work as a district to vigorously support our East Middle School students, families, and staff as they transition to new settings. We'll work to help our East Middle School staff find positions within our school system that allow them to continue to share their strengths and talents within a new setting, just as they have for our East Middle School community for so many years. We will work to help our East Middle School students and families through the transition to a new school setting. And I know our principals and staff at the schools receiving our East Middle School students are looking forward to welcoming them and supporting them with open arms. We'll work to help support the social and emotional needs that currently are and will continue to be evident for our East Middle School students, families, and staff. We will work to support the transition of the Challenge Program, a great program with a great legacy, to a new location and support our Challenge Program students and families with the transition by removing barriers. And we will do the necessary work to support, because we are not a district of schools, we are a school district and a D51 family. I know there are a range of emotions being expressed right now after the decision, and that is natural. I know that we as a community and as a D51 family can come out of this even better in the end. In many cases, one-time difficult decisions can make way for thousands of future decisions, so we don't exhaust ourselves over trying to fix the same problem over and over again. This difficult decision will pave the way for 1,000 future decisions that can better serve our students and staff. This difficult decision will allow us to better staff our middle school buildings moving forward, which in turn will allow us to better support our students and staff in the middle school buildings. That is the focus, that's the goal, better support for our students. One of my core beliefs is that I try to put kids first in everything that I do, and we have to do better. We have to better staff our schools and our programs in the middle school level if we want to better support our kids and put them first. We have to do better, and we will. Let's now move forward towards healing as a D51 family. Let's support one another and not divide one another. Let's wrap support around our East Middle School students, staff, and families. Let's recognize that there will be hurt and loss, and that folks need time to process and be upset. And let's ensure that on the other side of processing those emotions, the impacts of this decision are positive ones for our students and staff in the end. I want to thank this board for their leadership. I want to thank the East Middle School community for all the great work that they have done, the great work that they'll continue to do as we finish out the school year, and the great work that they will share with the larger D51 family in the future. Thank you.
All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All right. Second. Thank you, everyone.